Waterfowl Fattening Operations as a potential reintroduction and amplification environment for highly pathogenic avian influenza, also known as bird flu. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll get started. A little bit of background for anyone that doesn't know yet. Highly pathogenic avian influenza is a rapidly mutating virus that is spread historically amongst birds, but it's a fever-resistant virus that is now affecting multiple different animal species. It's considered the biggest pandemic affecting animals worldwide. It has pandemic potential for human beings, with waterfowl species like ducks and geese serving as the primary reservoir host of the virus. Since they are the natural vectors of the virus, they can carry it asymptomatically. So you could potentially see a duck or a goose and they may not look sick, but they could be harboring the virus. Because they carry this asymptomatically and this species is farmed intensively, it facilitates. Not sure what that was, sorry. It facilitates global dissemination to a wide variety of avian and mammalian species. H5N1 strain of avian flu has already been detected on fur farms, dairy farms, and swine farms. So the purpose of this type of waterfowl fattening, the agriculture purpose is to produce a fattened liver product of the ducks and geese called foie gras. So foie gras is the French term for the liver. And essentially, a normal weight for a duck or a goose liver is about 40 grams. But after the fattening process, they enlarge it to at least 300 grams to be considered foie gras. And this production is largely concentrated in just a few countries. So France and Hungary serve as about 75% of the world's global marketplace for foie gras, with France being the #1 consumer of these products as well. And waterfowl fattening farms have been identified as highly susceptible amplification environments for HPAI because they rely on very large concentrations of ducks and geese. So sometimes potentially hundreds of thousands of birds in a warehouse. The photo behind the slide here is taken on a foie gras farm in France. So during the force feeding phase, essentially the ducks live about 12 weeks under normal intensively artificially packed confinement, but then for 3 weeks they're overfed 3 times a day via a tube. So in a normal duck rearing production, they would eat about a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of food a day. But in this force feeding phase, the 3-week-long phase, they feed them about 5 to 6 cups per day. So about 10 times the amount of a natural diet. And obviously this generates substantial quantities of feces and wastewater that rapidly exchange amongst the birds and the human handlers. It also spreads more feathers and increases the amount of carcasses because the mortality rates during the force feeding phase are about 10 to 20 times higher than regular duck production. So this facilitates rapid viral transmission between the birds and each other and humans and off of the farms. These foie gras production zones, where they're very highly concentrated, have been recorded as epicenters of HPAI outbreaks. Like I said before, France and Hungary account for about 75% of the recorded global production. And between 2020 and 2024, those 2 countries alone recorded 65% more outbreaks than the rest of the 25 other countries in the European Union combined. So you can see in the pie chart, the red accounts for just France and Hungary, while the other colors account for all 25 other countries with HPAI outbreaks. Even despite vaccination attempts in these countries and after repeated declarations that they were free of this virus, HPAI reemerged on their foie gras fattening farms. So there's been a very high risk viral reassortment of this virus. The H5N1 strain originally emerged in 1996, but in 2020, a mutation was observed in the Netherlands that spread across Europe very rapidly because of the high concentration of force-feeding duck farms. So in 2020, the new clade 2.3.4.4b emerged, and then migratory birds spread it worldwide and has now spilled over to mammal species. That's what makes that clade so much more dangerous than previously observed versions. This version of the virus has been observed in over 49 different mammal species. Animals that you wouldn't have thought could catch bird flu, like dolphins and polar bears, coyotes, raccoons, etc., tigers, lions, they've all been observed infected with the virus. And every time the virus infects a new species, it gives them an opportunity to learn and reassort. So these viruses can replicate billions of times in a single host, so a single person or a single animal, generating different mutations as they incorrectly replicate themselves. And so the timeline essentially is in 1996, there was the emergence. In 2020, the mutation emerged that could infect other mammal species. So in 2022, bird to mammal infections were recorded on mink farms. Minks are, if you don't know, small carnivorous animals that they are farmed for their fur, similar to foxes. And then in 2024, another mutation had been recorded where mammal to mammal transmission was observed on dairy farms, on cow farms that they are farming for milk. And then just recently in 2026, a new mutation was occurred that allowed for airborne transmission of this virus. So they were able to airborne transmit virus between cows observed in a dairy farm in California, United States. Scientists are now saying that only 1 to 4 additional mutations may be needed for effective human-to-human transmissible pandemic-related urgency. So migratory birds enable a transcontinental transmission pathway from France and Hungary to essentially all over the world. If you can see on this map, migratory birds pass over this Mediterranean flyway and come into contact with farms in France and Hungary, and then quickly spread the disease throughout the world. I live in the United States, so most of our research is on how it impacts the United States, and they bring it over to the Atlantic and Central America flyway, with the United States Department of Agriculture reporting 100% of the virus infections on United States farms originating from this European strain. H5N1 is especially concerning. The bird flu is especially concerning because it has very high human mortality rates. If you remember, a century ago, the Spanish flu, that was also a bird flu. And so this strain, H5N1, is recording approximately a 50% mortality rate that's indiscriminate for age. So it's not like COVID-19 that was primarily affecting senior citizens or people that already had immunological deficiencies. This is affecting everyone from 18-year-olds, healthy men across the board. And why it's so dangerous is because the H5N1 induces what's called a immunological storm that rapidly overproduces inflammatory messengers, so essentially causes organ failure throughout the body. And like I said earlier, it's fever resistant because the birds operate at a higher temperature than we as humans do. Birds operate at about 103 to 108 degrees Fahrenheit, and humans operate at about 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So when our normal immune response of a fever up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, I'd say, can't actually kill off these viruses in that sense. And particular to these waterfowl fattening farms, these aren't global farms. Like I mentioned, the marketplace primarily exists in France, Hungary, and even China harbors some of these farms. But the cost of indemnity programs for farmers and surveillance and vaccination attempts, and the cost that's passed on to consumers for increased product costs, like eggs and turkeys, for example, is spread globally. So in the United States alone, just since 2020, they've spent $2.4 billion on mitigating the spread of HPAI, which means they mass cull all animals on farms that have been recorded to be affected. And the amounts that are spent in every single country are astronomical, considering that there's a very small niche market in just a handful of countries. So for comparison, it's widely known that bats are the primary host for many dangerous viruses, including SARS-type viruses like COVID-19 and filoviruses like Ebola, for example. So if an operator was suggesting housing 200,000 bats and rapidly accelerating their life cycles and exponentially increasing their shared bodily fluids and repeated contact with humans, emergency would be declared. And so based on our surveillance data, we're saying that waterfowl species need to be viewed with the same scrutiny and same biological concern because they're the introductory host of the deadly influenza virus. So essentially, when we know better, we need to do better and phase out these waterfowl fattening farms. I'm happy to take any questions about this if anyone has any.